So I've been doing a lot of wing foiling this summer, as I do most summers because it's pretty windy and pretty flat here. This is a session I had 2 days in a row at a place on the Maui southeast side, all to myself, small waves, really strong offshore winds, kind of sketchy. You make a mistake, you are going on the rocks and destroying everything. So you can see I'm riding pretty conservatively, but there's a good reason for it. Definitely wanted to stay off the rocks. The wind was also nearly straight offshore, making it pretty hard to penetrate against the wind sometimes. And then kicking out at the end of the wave, there's no wind at all inside. So having to pump back out to the wind line. A lot of fun. This whole session is in slow-mo to show you just how the foil works under your feet on a wave. At the end of the video, I'll go through some tech stuff on my equipment, what kind of board I'm riding, what kind of foils I prefer, etc. So if you wait till the end of the video, if you're into the equipment side of things, hang out and we'll talk about the gear at the end. of you know, I've been board riding my whole life. I started out skimboarding, surfing, and then of course got into windsurfing when I was 11 years old, and I've been windsurfing my entire life. Still windsurf an awful lot. Still surf, still kite surf quite a bit, stand-up paddle, and of course now a lot of wingfoiling, especially in summertime when it's pretty windy and flat here most of the time. Wingfoiling is a really good option. A lot of people ask what kind of gear I use. I'm going to be showing you a session from Maui's southeast side this summer where we had pretty decent little waves, nobody out. I had 2 sessions all by myself at a place that's kind of sketchy. You're right on the rocks. If you go down, your stuff is destroyed for sure. And so you'll see I'm foiling pretty conservatively. And people say, yeah, it's nowhere near as radical as windsurfing or kiting. It's definitely not. It's very different. But there's a beauty to it. You are really connected to the wave in a different way than you are conventionally surfing or windsurfing or kiting. It's really fluid. It may look super conservative. Sometimes it feels like a little bit like you're standing on a ball, but it is an awful lot of fun. I always ride with foot straps. In this session, I was riding a, almost knocked the foil over. In this session, I was riding a 72 liter, pretty good sized board, and I always ride with straps. I want to be the driver of the board, not a passenger. It gives me way more direct control over everything that the board does. I ride more volume than most people. You know, a lot of guys are in a race to use as small a board as possible. I want to have float. Sorry, had to brake for an airplane there. So again, I tend to ride a little bit more volume than most guys. The sport is kind of going in the direction of as small a board as possible all the time. I want to be able to get up on my board and go even if the wind dies completely. And so I have just enough float to be able to get out of the no wind zone, for example, which where I was riding, there was absolutely no wind on the inside, very, very offshore. You kick out and pretty much have to pump back out to the wind line. But even when I'm just free riding, I'm usually on a board that'll pretty much float me. I also tend to ride my mast really far forward, all the way up as far as I can get it. I want to have my back foot way behind my mast, which also gives me really good control of the board fore and aft. So different than most people. My foil, I'm pretty much always on a 95 centimeter carbon mast, sometimes even longer. But in this session, wave riding, if I'm free riding, I'm always on a 95. A lot of people are on 85, but I like a deeper mast, so I've got more range up and down that I can work with. I was on an 840 HA, the new HA, really good all around. A lot of people will say it's a little big for wave riding. I wave ride up to a 914, even a 1040. Again, I'd rather have a little more foil than a little less foil, especially in sketchy conditions where you do not want to get stuck on the inside, because if you go on the rocks, you are done. So I was riding an 840 front wing, a 220 rear wing, and a carbon 100 95 centimeter mast, all the way forward in my box. For this session, I was riding the ADX 3.5, so a really small wing for me. Normally I'm pretty much the biggest wing on the water, but because it was so windy and so offshore, I went small, and it was the perfect size. The ADX is rigid handle, so really, really good control. It's also got a lot of induced camber, so for wave riding against the wind, maybe not the perfect choice compared to an MK4 or a Matador, but still great all around. And I'm the kind of guy that wants to use one set of gear for everything. I don't want to be changing foils and changing wings depending on discipline. I want something that I can use for whatever all the time and not be constantly switching gear. And the ADX does everything really, really well.